Let me introduce you all to Colette Funches. She lives in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, about 15 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. And while she's been a storyteller her whole life, she's only become a journalistic storyteller in the last 2 years. Here she is at a Black Lives Matter rally last year with her pen and pad in hand. And here's her first piece of journalism. She wrote a story about her local library getting a new parking lot. When she first started working, she was writing all of her stories by hand, and then she moved on to an electric typewriter until the ribbon broke. Now she's got a laptop computer, but she doesn't love it. If you mention the word citizen and journalist together to a lot of professional journalists, you often get either an eye roll or the sentiment that, yes, we know we should be working with citizens, but it's messy and it takes time and it's hard to verify information. And all of that is true. But the reality is that in the absence of traditional news in a lot of places known as news deserts, where journalists have either disappeared or perhaps never existed in the first place, if citizens want to find out what's going on in their community, they have to do the work themselves. And that's a form of journalism. So how do they do that? People do what they've always done. They go to places where others gather, to their barbershop and beauty shops and to churches and grocery stores, and they just have conversations. They ask, what have you heard? What do you know? And they try to piece it all together. And of course, they also turn to social media. McKeesport in the Mon River Valley, where Colette lives, has something like 75 different local Facebook groups, including at least a half dozen that purport to tell news, and one that actually even has the name of the former newspaper, the McKeesport Daily News. Now, that newspaper closed at the end of 2015 after 131 years. And at first, people had no idea what they were losing. They really couldn't appreciate it. But now, in the absence of traditional news, they just post information to Facebook. It could be all kinds of things. Very little of it would qualify as journalism or even news. It's more like people are looking around their community and just trying to make sense of things. And oftentimes, they put out information that's inaccurate or irrelevant or biased. In one worst case scenario, a resident recently posted a story on Facebook that a police officer had been shot. It was inaccurate. But then a second person jumped on Facebook to say, oh, yes, I can, quote, confirm that information because I drove past the hospital and there were police cars everywhere. And even when an officer got involved and tried to correct the situation, people shouted him down. Despite all these challenges, Facebook's local groups have become like de facto town halls in places where people struggle to get information. You can see that in the first months of the pandemic, membership in these groups grew by more than 3 times. And we know that Facebook has done a lot already to support local journalism. The grants from the Facebook Journalism Project were instrumental, particularly during the pandemic when organizations like the Pittsburgh Current were on the brink of collapse, and $5,000 made a big difference. And Facebook also, like Substack, has agreed to set aside a pot of money to pay local journalists and writers and reporters to tell stories. And Facebook also helps group administrators make money by selling advertising on videos and selling subscriptions and holding events. But if we all agree that we need to do more to support local journalism, we also have to rethink what it means to be a journalist. Because in a lot of places, citizens are trying to do this work, but they don't have the tools or resources to do it well. So what can we do to support them? One, we need to celebrate citizens when they perform acts of journalism, whether it's in a formal setting or something as informal as a tweet or a post. We act like social media is ephemeral, but in reality, it makes up our shared narrative for better and for worse. Here, Colette's practicing for a live storytelling event with a group called Tube City Writers. This group gets together every couple of weeks and they work on things like objectivity and how to do interviewing and how to write stories better. And that underscores the second thing we need to do, which is provide more training and resources for citizens who want to do journalism to help them do a better job of it. Colette has become so involved with the group, she's become one of its most prolific writers. The project manager, Martha Ryle, recently got Colette up on the internet, and she's got an email address now, and she's really not happy about it, and can any of us really blame her? So how do we bridge this gap? On one hand, we have citizens who want to tell stories about their communities, and on the other, we know that they don't have the resources or the skills to do a good job of it. I actually think Facebook is uniquely positioned to help solve this problem. It already has millions of local group administrators trying to manage and tell stories about their communities. What if we gave these people more journalistic training and also gave them financial resources to support and reward their efforts? It's not only the right thing to do, but I believe it's good business as well, because people are already turning to these local groups to try to figure out what's going on in their community. But oftentimes, the information's inaccurate or misleading or simply overwhelmingly negative. If we could make it more reliable, people would turn there even more often. And in the process, we could start, instead of disparaging or fearing people like Colette, we could lift up their work and celebrate it and open the doors of newsrooms to more citizen journalists everywhere. Thank you.